This anime begins as a peaceful city is attacked by a monster known as the kaiju. The emergency kaiju alert sounds throughout the city and people are directed to designated safety areas. This thing is huge and it causes massive destruction while roaming the city, so a defense force arrives and opens fire on it. This is in humanity's first time being attacked, so some people watching the scene eagerly wait to see which division of the defense force will arrive. It's the third division and they swiftly move in to deal some damage to the kaiju. One girl from the division carries a large cannon and uses this weapon's immense power to put a hole right through the kaiju, ending its life as she watches. Afterwards, our protagonist named Kafka is amazed at how huge the monster was. Its body parts are scattered everywhere, so he told the others in his group that they will surely have to work overtime for a while. Nearby citizens cheered the third division for completing their mission with no casualties. Kafka arrives in of the crowd that has gathered, and while the heroes walk away from the defeated monster, Kafka walks towards it. This is because his job begins after the battle is over. Him and the group he is in does the job that no one cares about and no one is grateful for. They are in charge of taking the defeat of kaijus apart and getting rid of them. Kafka does just that and deposits a sample of the monster in some drone. Their job is not as glamorous as fighting the beast, but it's definitely a different kind of battle in its own right. This is perfectly demonstrated when Kafka notices someone hoisting something they should not be and it explodes, causing someone to get hurt. Luckily, Kafka has had injuries just like it before, so he handles the situation. These guys have a ton of work ahead of them and Kafka Lumens are the bosses want them to clean up the gigantic mess in just 1 week. Just then Kafka is told that he will be going to a different area as they're short-staffed, and he is shocked to hear that he will be going to the intestines. Kafka is dragged away, so the others discuss just how bad the intestines are. Kafka arrives at the intestines and instantly loses his appetite. He is a hard worker though, so Kafka pushes through his discomfort to get the job done. That night, Kafka arrives home exhausted, and he does his best to get rid of the smell from work. A news report comes on about Division 3, and their captain, named Mina. At just 27 years old, she has not just become the captain, she has managed to slay hundreds of kaiju. A look back shows that she and Kafka were friends, and she was emotional when they promised to eliminate kaiju together. Mina is incredibly popular and famous now, so there are talks of her becoming a candidate for commander of the defense force. Kafka wonders how he ended up on the opposite side of things, but the thought is too depressing, so he tries not to think about it. He reminds himself that cleaning is also an important job that helps people. On top of that, he's able to eat the foods he likes and has an apartment that he is content with. Kafka thinks that there should be enough and just goes to sleep. The next morning, Kafka arrives at work where he is introduced to the part-time student that will be working with them from now on. His name is Ichikawa and he is determined to join the defense force. Kafka's coworker points out that Kafka had the same dream he has, but he eventually just gave up and became a veteran at the cleaning company. Ichikawa wonders why he gave up, so Kafka conceives that he realized that his abilities are limited. He tried hard, but there's always someone better. Kafka tries to have a positive attitude about it, but Ichikawa completely serious. He declares that he will never give up for any reason, so he can't understand Kafka's logic. He doesn't want to understand either, so he just goes to get changed. Everyone thought that they would get along because of their shared dream, but Kafka is furious since he knows that there was no way to answer the kid's question without looking miserable. Kafka is forced to do some reflection and he wonders if quitting is really that bad. They all had to work and go over the plan for the day. They decide which parts need to be preserved for research and which parts simply need to be destroyed. Ichikawa is assigned to the intestines. Kafka is glad because of the kid's attitude, but he finds that he will be assigned to intestines as well for the second day in a row. He is told that it's because he's good at dealing with intestines, so Kafka vows to show everyone what he's made of. The boss points out how Kafka complains a lot, but acknowledges that he's a diligent worker. If he had passed the exam, he would have been a good defense force officer. Afterwards, Kafka is happy to see that Ichikawa was grossed out by the intestines experience, but he had it just as bad as he must keep himself from puking. Just then, Kafka notices that the kid didn't bring much to eat. Ichikawa rudely tells him that he doesn't have much of an appetite, but Kafka gives him a vitamin drink. He insists that Ichikawa drink as much as he can, or else he won't be able to make it through the workday. Kafka also offers him some nose plugs. Ichikawa refuses them, but Kafka insists that it will help. At the end of the workday, everyone gets cleaned off and one group leaves first. Kafka is glad to see that the worst part of the cleanup process should be over now. Ichikawa arrives, so Kafka thinks he wants a rematch from their little wrestling match, but Ichikawa surprisingly thanks him for his help getting through the day. Before he leaves, Ichikawa points out that the defense force has changed their age limit to join. It is now 33 years old. Ichikawa knows that it's none of his business, but he could tell the Kafka looks sad when he talked about the defense force earlier. Ichikawa tells him that he can just quit if he wants though, but Kafka thanks him and states that Ichikawa is a better person than he thought. Ichikawa tries to keep his edgy persona, so he reminds Kafka that he doesn't actually care, but just then the monster appears to attack him. Kafka rescues him just in time. He's in bad shape. Ichikawa is shocked by what he calls a kaiju, and Kafka must rescue him from being eliminated once again. Kafka tells him to run and get help, but he refuses to leave Kafka. Kafka reminds Ichikawa that he's supposed to join the defense force, but he won't be able to if he dies now. Kafka once again demands that Ichikawa leave, so he does. Kafka gets the terrifying monster to chase him through the streets and just barely manages to dodge its attacks. He then gets away for a moment by running into a narrow building and runs through a pane of glass. Another look back shows the Kafka and Mina both lost their schools and their homes. Kafka hated the kaiju, but only because they kept him from finishing his Pokemon game. Mina was disappointed to hear that this was all he cared about, but Kafka is just keeping a positive attitude. As for Mina though, she was sad because a cat named Miko died. They became serious as they stared at all the damage done by the kaiju, and they simultaneously declared that they will join the defense force. The two insult each other for this crazy idea since they are both so young, but they eventually decide to have a competition to see who can become the coolest officer. Kafka assured that they could do it and declare that they will eliminate all the kaiju together. Back to the president, Kafka realizes that things should not have ended up this way. He must continue running though, as the monster just smashing through buildings to get to him. Kafka decides to make a stand against the monster and determines that he must attack its legs. Unfortunately, he doesn't stand a chance as the monster instantly attacks him, and Kafka wonders why things ended up this way. Kafka screams in agony as the monster stomps on him, and he can no longer move as his leg is broken. Kafka loses all hope as the monster's just about to consume him, but Ichikawa appears to rescue him just in time. Kafka calls him an idiot, but Ichikawa explains that he already notified that defense force. Kafka meant that he was an idiot for coming back at all, but Ichikawa points out that if he abandoned Kafka, he would never be able to become a defense force officer. Just then Kafka has flashbacks to when he received the defense force rejection letter and his dreams were crushed. He curses himself for being so useless, as Ichikawa gets thrashed around by the monster. Kafka is furious since he hasn't changed at all. He wasn't able to protect his friend's cat, and now he can't even protect the new kid at work. Kafka's frustration causes him to scream out with rage just as Ichikawa about to be eliminated by the beast. However, just then the monster's absolutely blown to pieces, leaving the two guys shocked. A female voice declares that the target has been eliminated, and Kafka shocked to see that Mina has arrived with the other members of the 3rd Division. She has some of her crew take care of the injured, while her and the rest go check for more kaiju. Kafka is checked on, but he's in really bad shape and unresponsive. That night at Yokohama Hospital, Kafka marvels at how amazing Mina has become. She was able to eliminate such a terrifying monster in an instant, so Kafka determines that she has gone to a place that he can never reach. Kafka thought that he was alone, but he is shocked when he learns that Ichikawa right next to him. Ichikawa points out that if Kafka didn't rescue him and tell them to run away, he would be dead right now. Kafka is then shocked when Ichikawa says that he is cool, and Kafka thinks about his competition with Mina to become the coolest officer. Ichikawa thinks that Kafka should be an officer, but once again declares that it's up to him. Kafka punches himself, finally snapping out of his negative mindset as he wonders how long he was intending to turn a blind eye. He thanks Ichikawa and tells the kid that he really is a good person. Kafka still doesn't think that giving up is a bad thing, but it's definitely not good to deceive himself. He then confidently declares that he will once again aim to become a defense force officer. His heroic declaration is interrupted though when he's shocked to find a monster hovering above him. This thing says that it has found him and it shoves itself into Kafka's mouth. Ichikawa wonders if he is okay, but he's clearly not as he gasped for air and thrashes about. Ichikawa checks on him, but he is shocked to find a monster in Kafka's bed. Kafka casually looks at Ichikawa and then casually looks at his reflection. The shock eventually hits them, so Kafka tries to tell Ichikawa to calm down and that it's him. Ichikawa calms down, but some old guy arrives to call the defense force. Two guys freak out as they think about what the defense force does to kaiju, so the guys panic as Ichikawa tells Kafka to run. Another look back shows Kafka telling Mina how to immobilize kaiju. She took notes as he told her that she needed to attack the legs and tie it up. Mina was scared by the thought of fighting a monster, so Kafka assured her that when the time comes, he will be by her side. Back to the present, Mina thinks about how that was a lie. Just then Mina is informed that a kaiju was spotted at the Yokohama hospital and she declares that she will handle it. She will dispatch along with her officers and they will eliminate the kaiju. Kafka once again gets hit with a flashback involving Mina from their childhood days. Kafka was a big fan of anime and reading manga comics since the very beginning, which Mina thought was a complete waste of time. So she made fun of him for his obsession with fictional stories and for thinking that he could be like one of the main characters of those mangas. But at the same time, she liked his silly behavior and his overprotectiveness and thanked him for always being beside her. Back to the present, Mina no longer has the same feelings inside her. She and her defense squad get informed about the sighting of a kaiju where the two sweepers, Kafka and Ichikawa, were hospitalized. So she gets ready with her team to exterminate kaiju, knowing that if they don't act quickly, it will lead to unwanted casualty. Meanwhile, many social media pages, news channels and emergency alarms also bring awareness of the kaiju sightings to the people of the town, prompting them to stay alarmed and safe in their homes. On the other hand, at the hospital, Kafka, who is turned into a kaiju, is doing a great job, terrifying his fellow hospitalized old man. Ichikawa, being the only understanding person, tries to clear up the misunderstanding, telling the grandpa that Kafka is the human. Kafka also tries to show that a book shouldn't be judged by its cover and gives off a wholesome smile, which turns out to be so terrifying that it causes the old man to become unconscious. Kafka realizes that ugliness sometimes comes with its benefits as he discovers to have super strength in his current form. His accidental destruction of the hospital walls alarms the other patients, who immediately run off and call the defense corps to deal with miniature Godzilla. Ichikawa suggests that Kafka escape from there through the window to not get entangled with the defense corps, and jumps off before him to give him the courage to also take the leap. Mina's team learns that the kaiju they are pursuing has fled from the hospital, so they also change their route and rush in the direction where the kaiju ran off. Ichikawa, who can't believe his innocent senior has turned into a kaiju, questions how it can even be possible. While still running away from the sight of the public, Ichikawa turns around to see if Kafka is doing all right and finds out that bro has mutated even more. It's as if he wasn't ugly enough already. He adds a disgusting attribute to himself as well and eats a bird alive using his parasitic tongue to grab it. After filling his appetite, Kafka reverts back to his original kaiju form when he realizes that more trouble is awaiting them. Ichikawa assumes that Kafka is about to be consumed by his inner demon, but Kafka explains that that is not the case and states that he has a sudden urge to pee. Not wanting to defame himself in public by peeing in the streets, Kafka wonders what he should do to protect his dignity. From what Ichikawa sees, he mentions that Kafka doesn't even have what is needed to do so, to which Kafka reveals that his kaiju version uses nipple to release things. At least, men's nipples are finally functional now. Both Ichikawa and Kafka find this method of doing number one to be shocking, but they don't question it too much as they have other things to worry about. Ichikawa thinks that they should get going on their run, but Kafka expresses his desire to end his life, as he now knows no woman will ever think of marrying him because of what his nipples can do. It's mind-blowing that he thinks having piss nipple is the only roadblock to his marriage now, after having turned into a monster. Anyway, Kafka figures that he can now join the defense corps now that he is super strong, but Ichikawa doesn't think that will ever happen because the defense corps is solely against creatures like Kafka, making Kafka realize that he will never be able to reestablish his friendship with Mina again. For now, he and Ichikawa decide to hide behind a locked facility when suddenly Kafka senses that something is moving underneath their feet. As he realizes that it's another kaiju that is coming from underground, it breaks out in the open just around the block. Mina gets informed about the second kaiju sighting, but upon learning that it's in the same area where their first target is, she continues moving towards that location with her team. Although Kafka wishes to fight this new kaiju using his newfound power, Ichikawa stops him as he thinks it's the perfect chance for them to hide, since the Defense Corps will be busy dealing with the kaiju. So they go into hiding, which allows the monster to cause mass destruction in the area, leading to a little girl's entire family suffering an untimely death. The little girl desperately tries to free her mother from the rumble she is stuck in. Just then the monster comes their feed on prey. Kafka arrives there to save the day, and with the sucker punch he launches the monster away from there. The little girl, who is initially scared by Kafka's appearance, quickly realizes that he isn't bad at all, so she seeks his help, asking him to save her dying mother. As they get busy rescuing the mother from under the rubble, it gives the monster enough time to get back there, telling Ichikawa to take both the mother and child to safety. Kafka gets filled with determination to teach the monster a lesson. He punches as hard as he can with all the energy in him and launches an uppercut with so much power that it causes the monster to burst into nothing but an infinite amount of blood, with every single one of them realizing that Kafka is stronger than the entire defense force. The only question that is left to answer is how Kafka is going to get into good terms with the defense force. The little girl thanks Kafka for saving both her and her mother's lives, which makes him remember the time when Mina was about her age. She also thanked him for always being beside her. They wandered around in the fields, acting like heroes as they both wanted to become one. This memory makes Kafka realize that he needs to join the defense force to be able to stand by Mina's side once again, and that desire itself lets him revert back to his human form again. Soon after, when Mina arrives with her team at the place where the monster appeared, she learns that a third party has already dealt with it, leaving only bloodstains scattered everywhere. Wondering who this mysterious hero might be, Mina questions the living witness, who is none other than the little girl. As she asks the girl about who did this, the little girl claims that she saw a regular man-sized kaiju who destroyed the monster with a single uppercut. The little girl begs Mina not to hurt the kaiju, who fought for mankind, calling him a good kaiju, which makes me no wonder how in the world a monster is supposed to be considered good by any sane person. In any case, her team makes a drawing of Kafka's kaiju based on the little girl's testimony and names it Kaiju number 8, which explains why the anime goes by that name. Apparently the defense force only gives code names to kaijus who they deem to be the most dangerous, and including Kafka, only 8 kaijus have been named up until now. 3 months have passed since the first sighting of Kaiju number 8. Both Ichikawa and Kafka have started working as sweepers again, acting like nothing has happened at all. The sweepers there who have learned from the news that the Defense Corps has failed to locate Kaiju number 8 for these past few months are baffled because the Defense Corps has never failed this badly, doing their task before. With every single law enforcement agency out looking for the Kaiju number 8, everything is still going okay because no one knows that Kafka is the Kaiju number 8. Ichikawa reveals that both he and Kafka have taken the entrance exam of the Defense Corps and it is the time of their result. As expected, Ichikawa passes the first round of the entrance exams, who excitedly rushes to Kafka's work site, giving him the news that he too has passed the first round. Kafka, who is working alone in the cleanup site, reveals to be in his kaiju form just chilling around, having his lunch and gets rightfully kicked in the stomach by Ichikawa for taking things too lightly, even though he is currently the most wanted man in their country, realizing that he shouldn't expose his kaiju form recklessly. Kafka apologizes to Ichikawa and wipes up his demonic face. However, the demonic teeth still remain even on his human face, which gets him scolded even more as he should have mastered his transformation in these 3 months. While screaming and shouting at Kafka, Ichikawa informs him that his kaiju form is on the news, which means that everything is now public information and if only one person sees Kafka in his kaiju form, he will be in grave trouble. Now that he understands everything, Ichikawa explains how they didn't get suspected as being at the hospital. He reveals that after defeating the monster back then, both of them went straight back to the hospital, claiming to have run away just around the corner to be safe from Kaiju's attacks, which fortunately fooled everyone and yes, the old man saw both of them back then, but his statements won't have any credibility because of his old age. So moving on, Kafka gets his results, but he doesn't become too happy about them, even though it was his dream to pass these exams once, which surprises Ichikawa. Kafka explains that he has always passed in the first rounds, so he isn't excited by it at all, and proudly reveals that he only fails every time in the second round of the selection, but now that he is overpowered, he is confident that he will win the second round smoothly as well. However, Ichikawa doesn't think Kafka will be able to use his superpowers in the second round because many experienced Defense Corps officers will be monitoring all of the examining strictly. Even so, Kafka wants to try and give it his all because it is indeed his last chance to catch up to his old friend Mina. So with both of the sweepers' goal of passing the second round, they start considering themselves rivals and get ready for what's about to come soon. Kafka tries to open up a bottle, but because he is too weak, he transforms into his kaiju form and opens it, which instantly makes Ichikawa realize that this cheater is about to get into big trouble in the second round. Anyway, 10 days later, the Defense Force Selection Test's second round is held at the West Tokyo venue. The two sweepers, Ichikawa and Kafka, arrive at the test site and are amazed by how big the Defense Force's headquarters in West Tokyo is. They notice that many armed soldiers are everywhere in the area prepared to take care of any troubles, which makes Kafka realize that if he accidentally transforms there, he will be sent to another world before deleting his browsing history. Many more candidates arrive there, one pink-haired guy on his bike, a green-haired hobo on foot, and a blonde in his track suits, who all motivate Kafka to give it his all against these youngsters. A rich young brat with 2 ponytails also arrives there, revealing to have her own butler, which means she probably already has connections who will let her enter the Defense Corps. She tries to get Kafka's attention, referring to him as uncle, and tells him to move his trash truck as she wants to park her luxury car there. Kafka mentions that there are many open spots, but the rich brat makes it clear that she wants her car to be parked there because she feels like it. As she picks up a fight with Kafka the old man, he gets furious and decides to teach her some manners, but she shows how strong she is by lifting up Kafka's truck with her bare hands and throwing it away, making it clear that she cannot be messed with. Proudly introducing herself as Kokoro Shinomiya just after throwing away Kafka's company car, she comes close to Kafka, accusing him of smelling just like how a kaiju usually smells. To avoid any suspicions, Ichikawa steps in telling Shinomiya that Kafka only smells like a kaiju because he is a sweeper whose day-to-day work is to dispose of kaiju corpses. Ichikawa also mentions that he himself is a sweeper, which makes Shinomiya question what these lowlifes with no social status think they are doing here taking part in the Defense Corps examination. Rather than giving her answer, Kafka goes back to his company's truck, lifts it up using his bare hands, and parks it in an open spot, making it clear that he cannot be picked up on just because he is an old man who has no social status. Shinomiya, on the other hand, doesn't understand how a human has this much strength when he doesn't even own a private suit like her, which is why her strength was enhanced and increased 100 times more than as usual. She realizes that she shouldn't mess with Kafka, so she instead directs her butler to park their car quickly before he can bring his mini truck back. Shinomiya, who had always thought that these entrance exams were just a formality with no competition whatsoever, finally thinks that things might take a turn to be interesting. Telling Kafka that she will soon take her revenge for the humiliation she faced now, she takes her leave and heads to the test hall with her butler and her 2 personal bodyguard. Ichikawa, in the meantime, becomes furious at Kafka because he thinks that there is no need for Kafka to show off his hidden powers to Shinomiya. He has already told Kafka many times that he cannot use his powers recklessly, as if something figures out that something is fishy, he will die at the hands of the Defense Corps or worse become a lab experiment for the government. Realizing that he shouldn't have shown her powers to Shinomiya, Kafka apologizes to Ichikawa and promises that he will be more careful next time. Anyway, they get going and head inside the Defense Corps Examination Center, both fully determined that they will pass the test at any cost. The second round of the entrance exam soon begins, involving many physical tests, which causes Kafka to struggle in his human form. Even though he has worked really hard these past couple of months, he is failing to keep up with others and in the end barely completing the stamina tests. He learns from Ichikawa that their next part of the physicals will be the fitness and aptitude tests, because not everyone has the talent for being an aptitude. Ichikawa suggests that Kafka give it his all in the fitness test, so accordingly Kafka gives it his all in the fitness test using only his human strength, but soon realizes that he has grown too weak because of his age. Being left behind, Kafka considers using his powers, but because of Ichikawa's warnings he doesn't do it, and as a result gets ranked in 6th place from the bottom of the ranks. That is, on the other hand, Shinomiya, who has made it to the top of the ranks, flexes her result paper by showing it to Kafka, tells him that he should really learn his place and reminds him of his low social status. Being left with no self-respect or dignity, Kafka wonders what he should do, but because he doesn't want to make the test unfair for others by using his kaiju powers, he begs Ichikawa to give him his invaluable guidance. On the other hand, Mina gets the list of applicants for this year, and after finding Kafka's application, she stops for a moment, implying that perhaps she still has some feelings for the guy who she has ignored for all these years. She learns more about the candidates from her subordinate, and according to him, the first person this year that strikes the eye is Haruchi Izumo, who has graduated at the top of his class from the most reputed university in Tokyo. Looking to be the most promising candidate of this year, Izumo has been ranked in second place in the fitness exam. Ichikawa, who is also in the middle of telling Kafka about the candidates, tells him about another promising candidate named Iharu Furuhashi, who is ranked third in the fitness exam and is basically gifted with super strength. Next up is the biggest deal of this year's Aoi Kaguraji, who is a newcomer in the self-defense force of Japan and has ranked first in the fitness exam. Although he was selected to become elite in Japanese Army Force, he chose to come to the Defense Corps instead, as his goal is to defeat kaijus. Just like these three, there are many more promising applicants who are trying to become elite officers, and that is why it has made things difficult for a week. Nobody like Kafka to be able to attain a good rank in these exams. Ichikawa also mentions the youngest girl to have appeared as a candidate in this exam. The rich brat Shinomiya, who many people think of as the greatest talent ever to have existed, while the other top candidates are excitedly waiting to see how Shinomiya will perform. Kafka, on the other hand, only gets jealous of her. Not only that, he also gets belittled by her and leaving by her bodyguards in front of all the other candidates, who wonder what even is up with this old loser. Although being left humiliated by Shinomiya's lowers Kafka's fighting spirit, he keeps his hopes high as the second part of their test is about disposing kaiju corpse, which is the sweeper's expertise. The 3rd Division of the Defense Corps, Vice Captain Sashiro Hashina, gathers all the candidates and begins the test, telling them to give it their best in the aptitude test. However, he surprisingly reveals that they will not be disposing of the kaiju corpses. Instead, they will be eliminated as living, breathing kaijus. Realizing that this is something not anyone can do, Kafka loses all hope of passing the second test. In any case, he and the other candidates wear their test gear, which is used by the Defense Corps as everyone equips their combat suit. It not only enhances their strength physically, but also becomes connected with their body, making each and every neuron of their body more responsive than ever. With the best weapons to fight the kaijus at their disposal, the candidates get ready for battle. The operator takes a moment to tell everyone that their combat gear can unleash a specific amount of power in their body, and reveals that, like Ichikawa, the other top candidates have also become able to release almost 10.15% of their combat power. The operator also claims that the suit has only ever managed to unleash the suit's 20% powers in its first use. But when they learn that Shinomiya can unleash a staggering 46% of the suit's power, it becomes clear why she is known as the talent of the century. On the other hand, the talented middle-aged loser has failed to unleash any combat power, which makes the suit completely useless for combat, and that revelation also makes the test examiner burst out laughing, as he has never seen someone so talentless like him ever. Kafka tries to squeeze out his potential by bending his knees, but we all know what will happen if he continues to squeeze things in that position. Seeing Kafka trying to take a dump with his face all red, the test examiner Sashiro once again bursts out laughing, wondering what a comedian is doing in the Defense Force exam. Shinomiya, on the other hand, who is seeing Kafka's super strength, gets annoyed at Kafka as she knows that he is deliberately hiding it from everyone. But anyway, with everyone going against Kafka's favor, the examiner Sashiro finally begins the final test. The instructor, Sashiro, takes all the participants to the field for the next stage of their competition. He tells them they will be fighting 1 Hanju and 36 Yaju. They were the kaijus that attacked the city some months ago, and they have been captured as test objects. They are risky and fearful, and as a result a drone will be following all the participants to find out if they are terribly injured. If a participant is injured in such a way that he won't be able to continue, such participant will be given a shield and removed from the competition. However, it will also mean the participant has failed. Sashiro tips them all with the fact that that stage of the competition is the worst of it and it is risky, so he won't advise any of them to participate, but if they want to, they should go. All the participants start the game and they all watch as Shinomiya rushes to climb the walls and kill the monsters. Within 2 seconds she has successfully defeated Yaju 12 and Yaju 3. Ichikawa and Kafka watch her as she does all of these and they wonder why they can't be as good as her. Kafka calls Ichikawa attention, telling him they have to kill some of the Yajus too. On the other hand, Ichikawa also feels inspired to fight and claims that it is his line and he has to kill enough of Yaju too. Unfortunately, they do not have any equipment to aid their shooting, and they aren't armed for combat. This makes them so annoyed, wondering how Shinomiya can defeat so many Yaju while they can't do anything. As they wallow in this, they hear another announcement from Sashiro, who informs them that Mina Ashiro is also there to engage in the competition and they should welcome her with their great works. Thinking of the history he has with her, Kafka doesn't want to lose it all. He asks Ichikawa if he knows the reason why the seniors have decided to use drones and stalk them. He feels if it is to know the number of kaijus that each of them killed, they can do that by checking the sensors of their body. Hence, he thinks the reason is to find out how they are going to participate in the combat. The emotional intelligence of all the fighters and how they make difficult decisions in face of danger. As a result, even if they don't have combat weapons to fight the kaijus, they should aid the others who are more equipped for that purpose. Ichikawa thinks about his suggestions and they leave to aid the others. They watch some of their colleagues trying to shoot aside you to no avail, and when Kafka looks well, he realizes he has once fought that kaiju before. He gets the key of how to defeat it and he throws a grenade at the kaiju. He informs the others that the kaiju has very short sight but sharp hearing. So now that he has blocked his ears, he won't be able to hear the shots and they can defeat him. He also advises them that they should shoot the kaiju in the stomach because the stomach is the most delicate part of a kaiju and they will defeat it that way. The boys take his advice and they are shocked to realize he is right. They call him Shinomiya's fanboy and he screams that he has his personality too. He continues with Ichikawa to find his next target on his way. A Yaju captures him in his hands and throws him at the wall. He loses some ribs and some organs on the body while Ichikawa calls out for him. Sashiro finds out on his sensors that he is almost dying, and they also see that the Yaju is going closer to him. Kafka recalls that if he gets weak and unable to continue or escape, he will be shielded from the competition and that will also mean he has failed. He doesn't want to fail that competition, so he tries to struggle. Sashiro communicates to him that his organs are failing and since they don't want any casualty, they will shield him out. Sashiro comments that he knows Kafka will be one of the first people to lose and despite having a great personality and being funny, he is nothing but weak. Just as they are about to shield him, a gunshot from behind kills the Yaju. He is glad that someone has saved him from that embarrassing situation, but his helper is no one else but Shinomiya. She tells him she has only saved him so he won't disturb her mission, and he should continue lying lifelessly on the floor like a coward that he is while she goes ahead to kill all the kaijus around. She leaves and Sashiro informs Kafka that his spine has broken, his organs are failing and his legs are so weak that he can't walk from that place. He asks him if he wants to give up, but Kafka thinks about all he has lost to get to that place. At that point, his manpower is at 0 and there is no way he can survive. He screams and says he isn't giving up. He insists that the only person who can make him give up is himself and he is tired of embarrassing himself in front of the person he wants to live and support. He admits that the only way he can be beside her is by standing strong and not giving up, and he has gone too far to stop now. Everyone wonders where his newfound strength is emitting from as he declares that he has laid his life to get to that point and even if it will take his life, he won't give up. His manpower moves to 0.01% as he struggles with his broken legs to stand up and continue the fight. Kafka recalls all he has to lose in the situation and he doesn't want to take any loss. He rises on his feet and decides he will continue the second round. He screams as they watch him in the situation room and they are shocked he is standing because his legs are completely broken. Sashiro warns him that he has internal bleeding and if he insists he wants to continue the competition, he can go on, but if he gets too weak to continue they will activate his shield, which means he will lose. He insists that he will continue and tells Ichikawa that he should proceed with the competition. To his shock, Ichikawa stretches his hands to him and asks him to come. He recalls the situation where he was also weak, and Ichikawa came through for him. He admits that Ichikawa is a person for all situations and tells Ichikawa that if they survive every other competition together, they can survive that one. He climbs on Ichikawa so that Ichikawa can be his legs and he can continue the exam. They watch them in the situation room and they laugh. Sashiro mocks that even if they aren't accepted into the team for their skills, They should be accepted for their comic relief because they are both a bit of a mess. They continue their competition and the other players stare at them because they look like fools. Ichikawa complains that their colleagues are looking at them, but Kafka encourages him that he doesn't have to care and that as long as they complete the exam, they are fine. He asks Ichikawa to find Shinomiya so they can support her. On the other hand, the players confront the last kaiju and it is stronger than they had expected. The others try their best to defeat it, but their efforts aren't productive. As expected, Shinomiya jumps into the scene and tells them they can't defeat her. She jumps at the kaiju and she shoots at it. She tries to finish up the kaiju, but it is a little greater than her. Kafka charges Ichikawa to carry him faster, so they can get to Shinomiya and ensure they help her defeat the kaiju. Ichikawa is tired because Kafka is heavier than he had expected, but he finds it difficult to say this to Kafka. Kafka encourages him to use their shield power to support himself so they can get to Shinomiya. As Ichikawa runs faster, Kafka gets exhausted too. At the fight, Shinomiya finds a loose part of the kaiju and she raises the last attack. She successfully gives it a last shot and kills the last kaiju. She breathes a sigh of joy as she wins the battle for her team, and they proceed to the next stage of the competition. The situation in the operating room is shocking. Sashiro had expected that most of the contestants would lose at that point. He felt he would be able to send off at least 30 of the competitors, and at that point none of them had been disqualified, and the worst that had happened to them all was injury. They all admitted that they had gotten the result they didn't expect, and they acknowledged that the only reason the competitors could survive to that extent was because of Shinomiya. They all know Shinomiya is the daughter of director, and they exclaim that they couldn't have expected the director's daughter to be made. She looks like she would be a very great plus to the defense team because she is supportive and ensures her teammates are in good shape. At the field, she is satisfied with what she has done that day and she looks at the sky, wondering if her father is proud of her and if he feels she is now doing as great as he thinks she will do. On the other hand, Ichikawa has eventually dripped Kafka from his back. Since the second part of the exam has ended, they hope for the best and they anticipate the result to know if they will qualify for the next. Suddenly, Shinomiya gets shot. It takes her a second to understand what is going on and she concentrates her energy on that part of her injury so she can survive. Kafka speaks with Ichikawa about Shinomiya being one of the only times that they had encountered her. They admit that she is the beast they think she is. She is the strongest of the team and she is supportive, a plus to any team they find themselves. If only they know the hero has been shot too. Shinomiya concentrates her shield on her chest to survive. She wonders which kind of kaiju you had shot her. In the operating room are also too distracted. Shinomiya heals her injury and the kaiju speaks to her, asking her what is happening in her body. She is shocked to see a kaiju speak and she admits that it is one of higher intelligence. After she heals herself, she tries to fight back. There is an emergency alarm in the operating room and Sashiro tries to find out what has happened. They find out there is an anomaly in the kaiju and the dead ones are reviving with more than 6 points of intelligence. Those are highly intelligent kaiju that only himself and probably Mina can defeat. Mina commands him to ask all the students to use the nearest shelter and also try to evacuate the students while she goes to fight the kaiju. They announce to the students to leave and they all start running, but Shinomiya refuses. She insists she doesn't want to be a coward and make her father proud. She stands up, but the kaiju shoots her again and throws her to the wall. She remembers her childhood when one of her school results was released and she was the first in the. Other students who got lower results than her were encouraged by their parents, but her father wasn't even available to celebrate her. The butler tells her that her father will return that night and she tells her father about her result. Instead of encouraging her, he asks her what she feels and if she thinks one success is enough for her. He says if he hypes her for one success, it will breed failure. He reminds her of her duty to the country and how she must make her late mother proud. For the sake of her mother, Shinomiya refuses to lose, and with the determination to win burning inside of her heart, she steps towards the monster with her gun. The monster smashes her away against the wall, but she gets up again, taking an oath to keep moving until she subdues the kaiju. With the wish and her father's command to become the strongest ever to be on a battlefield, Shinomiya continues to fight even though her hand has given up. As she unintentionally drops the gun from her hand, she realizes that the bones in her hand have broken into pieces, meaning that there is no way she can continue. Meanwhile, the examiners who have been keeping a keen eye on Shinomiya send aerial support to assist. knowing that something's wrong, and as they get the visual of the kaiju, it baffles them, as no other kaiju prior to this one has shown such amazing regenerative abilities. The lead analyst also notices that the kaiju is gathering energy inside its form to release a massive attack on Shinomiya, so she immediately informs both Mina and Sashiro, who rush to save her as she is the greatest talent in this century. Unfortunately, they did not reach there in time, causing Shinomiya to give up and bend on her knees, accepting her death by the kaiju. At death's door, she apologizes to her father for letting him down and for not being perfect enough. Kafka comes there just in time, telling Shinomiya to not give up just yet to rescue her from being blasted away by the evolved kaiju. Speaking of which, he himself evolves into his kaiju form in order to fight the kaiju and without any hesitation, shows her his true overpowered form. Meanwhile, the other candidates continue to fight the kaijus and begin evacuating the area, as all of the kaijus in that area keep on regenerating over and over. Ichikawa, on the other hand, hopes that Kafka isn't going to end up being taken down by the defense corps after they see them in his kaiju form. Ichikawa reveals that when he and Kafka were about to evacuate as well, Kafka heard from a senior that Shinomiya's life was in danger, so without even discussing it with Ichikawa, Kafka unhesitantly rushed to that area to save her. Speaking of them, Shinomiya becomes speechless after learning that the old man she has been teasing all day is actually a kaiju. Kafka, in his terrifying form, surprisingly gets down on his knees and begs Shinomiya not to tell the defense corps that he can turn into a kaiju because they will definitely eliminate him if they learn the truth. The monster tries to interrupt their conversation by launching an energy blast on them, but Kafka simply sends the attack the other way by simply punching it away, knowing that the monster isn't going to stop. Kafka gets up and tells Shinomiya that he will explain everything to her once he is done dealing with this monster. The lead analyst, who doesn't have visuals of Shinomiya's situation, detects that there is a strong surge of energy that is impossible for even a kaiju to generate, making her suspect that kaiju number 8 has shown up there. She informs Sashiro about the readings, but he calls it a system glitch as there is no chance that someone can generate so much energy. Kafka, in the meantime, turns on Super Saiyan mode and with the most powerful packed punch, he reduced the kaiju to nothing else, livening Shinomiya in awe as herself did not succeed in even damaging it at all. Anyway, Kafka gets rid of all of the other nearby kaijus as well and then continues peer conversations with Shinomiya, begging her once again not to repost him to the defense corps. He returns to his original human form and expresses how glad he is that Shinomiya is safe. Ichikawa comes there, banging his hand on Kafka's face for taking the risk of being exposed like that. While the two argue over nothing, Shinomiya faints because of the excess blood loss. Sashiro and Mina arrive at the location where they find the monsters to be reduced to nothingness, causing them to question who is behind the kaiju's execution. But the investigation part is over and their main priority is the examinee's safety. So once they learn that Kafka and Ichikawa have brought Shinomiya safely back to the base, they are left relieved. Mina issues the investigation unit to find out who or what did this to the kaiju here, and in the meantime, heads with Sashiro to the other locations to get rid of the kaijus who are still left alive. With the examination coming to an end, Kafka is sent to the Defense Corps hospital even though he is not too injured. Ichikawa visits him and lets him know that Shinomiya is doing well as well and only needs to get her right arm fixed because it's completely broken down to the core. Mina, who reveals to have been eavesdropping on their conversation, musters up enough courage to visit Kafka, who is just as surprised as Ichikawa, not because she has ignored him her whole life, but because she is the top dog of the Defense Corps. Mina, who has heard that it was Ichikawa who had carried Sashiro back to safety, thanks him for rescuing her, giving him a salute of honor. She says nothing else and takes her leave, but Kafka doesn't stop her as he has taken the oath that he will only confront her after becoming a Defense Corps officer. On the other hand, Shinomiya, who has been suffering mentally for not being perfect enough, is visited by Sashiro, who comes to interrogate the situation as to who was responsible for subjugating the kaiju. However, she doesn't tell him the truth and claims that it was she who defeated kaiju. Soon after, it becomes public news that kaijus can now come back to life even after being reduced to nothing, which scares the general public. The intelligent kaiju, who perhaps was responsible for letting those kaijus attain such regenerative abilities, also hears the news but gets shocked upon learning that none of those mutated kaijus survived, which makes him wonder if the captains of the Defense Corps are that strong to be able to subdue them, being left disappointed. The intelligent kaiju transforms his human form to blend in with the humans, but what's more surprising is that he is one of the new sweepers on Kafka's team, indicating that there will soon be a confrontation between the two transformers. The episode starts with Kafka and Ichikawa back at the kaiju cleaner's office. Kafka is panicking and going crazy with stress. He grabs Ichikawa and shakes him violently, blaming him for making him suffer like this. If it weren't for his encouragement, Kafka wouldn't have tried applying for the defense force again. Ichikawa yells back that this wasn't what he was saying the other day. In fact, Kafka was even thanking him in the hospital for inspiring him to try and achieve his childhood dreams again. Ichikawa is getting annoyed that Kafka was so cool back then. Thankfully, they were put out of their misery when their boss arrives and informs them that the two of them just received the mail. Their exam results have finally arrived. The two hesitate upon opening and reading their results. For Kafka, this was his last shot. Would he be able to keep his promise with Mina and join her? Or would he fail once again? He slowly pulls out his results and his eyes widen upon reading it. A few days later, all the newly passed members of the Defense Corps are gathered in the headquarters for their induction ceremony. Izumo congratulates Aoi for passing the exam, although it wasn't really a surprise that they both got in. Looking around, all the big names and famous people passed. Sadly, Izumo notices that Kafka is missing. Shinomiya arrives and others immediately congratulate her for passing first in their class. Izumo remarks how before the exam, he was expecting to finish top in their group, but upon seeing Shinomiya in action, he accepts defeat. It looks like he and Aoi would have to compete for top 2 instead. Aoi replies that he scored highest on the fitness exam, so he is still not giving up on his dream. He will aim for rank 1. On the other side of the room, Iharu accidentally bumps into Ichikawa. The two introduce themselves and shake hands. Iharu recalls Ichikawa being with Kafka during the exam and he tries asking if he failed. Unfortunately, before Ichikawa can reply, their induction ceremony suddenly starts. Everyone snaps into attention as the Captain Mina Ashiro enters the room. Everyone looks in awe at her as she heads to the stage. Shinomiya is also called on to the stage to act as the representative of the incoming class. Mina hands over their papers and announces that from this moment forward, the 27 recruits are now officers of the Defense Corps. Shinomiya promises that they will give their life for their mission and salutes Captain Mina. Before dismissing her, Mina addresses Shinomiya and thanks her for her help during the incident in the exam. If not for her, someone could have died. Shinomiya was surprised at this, and she looked extremely guilty. She knows that she was not the one who defeated the kaiju. In fact, Kafka should be the one who was receiving these words, so where is he? Kafka not only saved her life, but even worried about her like she was a little girl. She was humiliated and she still wants some answers about Kafka's kaiju form. She won't let Kafka just disappear back into the population. Thankfully, Shinomiya doesn't have to do anything drastic because someone just abruptly barged into the room. It was Kafka looking nervous and apologizing for interrupting the ceremony. Shinomiya, Ichikawa, and others are surprised but glad to see him. In a flashback, it was shown that Kafka actually failed the exam. Not only did he score the lowest on the fitness exam, but he also got a 0 on his aptitude test. All the other captains during the meeting discussing the recruits agreed with these assessments and easily dismissed him. Mina was about to defend him, but Vice Captain Hoshina suddenly raises his hand and volunteers to take him. He acknowledges that Kafka's numbers are below average, and he doesn't have the skills to be an officer. However, he noticed during the actual combat portion of the exam that Kafka not only identified the enemy kaiju's weak points, but also aided the overall effort in taking them down. He chose to help others instead of prioritizing his own kill count. Of course, Hoshina also liked that Kafka is funny as hell. Kafka is not a full officer, but Hoshina is willing to take him to his platoon as a cadet and give him more training. Back in the present, Mina explains to the others that Kafka is accepted only as a cadet, so he isn't joining them in the induction ceremony. Nevertheless, everyone is glad that Kafka passed because they saw his perseverance. Before the ceremony ends, Mina thanks everyone for deciding to join the defense force. She warns them that the kaijus are getting stronger and now more strange events are happening. However, this is also the reason why she wants them on her team. She promises to lead them and act as their shield and spear. Upon hearing her speech, Kafka hardens his resolve and promises that he will stand next to her soon. Unfortunately, he said this part out loud. Everyone was stunned at his sudden proclamation. He even called the captain by her first name. On the stage, Mina scolded him for speaking out of turn and disrespecting a superior officer. As punishment, he is ordered to do 100 push-ups. Vice Captain Hoshina laughs at Kafka's hilarious antics. However, he did notice that his captain seemed to smile a little. Hoshina is glad to have Kafka on their team because they need something to liven up their spirits from time to time. Of course, Hoshina also has another reason for wanting Kafka. During the exam when the kaijus were coming back from the dead, they saw a 9.8 level kaiju signal. Everyone thinks that a sensor must have broken, but Hoshina noticed that Kafka's vitals suddenly stopped at that same moment. Thus, he is going to keep Kafka close and find out what strange thing is up with him. Meanwhile, Kafka finally finishes his push-up, submits the cheers and applause of the other officers. Shinomiya invites him outside for a bit, and the others start teasing and asking if she's going to confess. However, Ichikawa tries to signal to Kafka that Shinomiya might want to talk about their kaiju secret. A few hours later, in a nearby restaurant, Shinomiya is shocked to learn that Kafka became a kaiju after eating one. Kafka wonders if he should just tell the defense corps and hope for a cure, but Shinomiya dashes his hopes away. She warns him that the defense corps would probably just experiment on him. This frightens Kafka and he begs Shinomiya to keep their secret. Shinomiya finally relents, but she warns Kafka that if she ever sees Kafka become a threat to mankind, she herself will kill him. Kafka smiles and wholeheartedly agrees. The Defense Corps' newest recruits training begins, and during this session, Ichikawa shows how skilled he is already when using guns, as he shows his aim and precision by shooting down the target signs in the distance. He gets perfect scores for shooting down all of the target signs in an instant, which brings an end to his fire training exercise. After this test, the examiner gives the report that he has been able to unleash his Defense Corps suit's 18% combat power, which surprises everyone, as that is quite a high score. Hoshina, who has been keeping an eye on the training from a distance, becomes impressed by Ichikawa as he didn't anticipate that this boy would grow so much in such a short amount of time. As Ichikawa sets this highest score amongst all the newbies, Iharu Furuhashi's turn comes up, who is naturally agitated because he must beat Ichikawa's score to prove that he is the strongest. He shoots down all of the targets with swift speed as well and finishes the test at a faster pace than Ichikawa, attaining the new high score. The report also states that he was able to unleash a total of 20% of the suit's combat power. This news brings Furuhashi's confidence back so much that he goes on to tease Ichikawa for losing against him. Ichikawa, of course, doesn't satisfy him with the reply since this is not a competition to begin with, while Furuhashi is busy taunting Ichikawa. Shinomiya in the meantime finishes her test in under a minute, setting new standards of her own and releasing an outstanding amount of 55% combat power from her suit. She mocks both Furuhashi and Ichikawa for fighting like a bunch of babies when their combined score is much lower than hers, as she makes everyone realize how mediocre they are in comparison to her. Aoi Kaguraji and Haruchi Izumo wonder how they will ever be able to top her. Speaking of getting top scores, our main character Kafka Hibino scores the bottom score and finishes the test in 7 minutes of time. Hey, at least he was able to release the suit hour by 1%. Unlike last time, Kafka himself becomes overjoyed to learn that he was able to turn his 0% score into 1, and begins to tease Shinomiya, saying that he will soon overtake her, but his instructor, Hoshina, brings him back to reality and makes it clear to him that at his current growth, he will never be able to become a full officer of the Defense Corps. With Kafka calmed down, Hoshina brings an end to the new recruits' fire training session, and tells them that their overall training will end if they all take 10 laps around the perimeter, as some of them begin to complain because of the sudden task. Hoshina increases the lap round to 15 and sends them away. In the meantime, Konomi notices how many rivalries amongst the recruits have already grown and thinks that they themselves will make each other better by competing against each other consistently. After the end of the first training day, Kafka and Ichikawa go for a nice long bath together, where they complain about what a heartless man Hoshina is. Furuhashi yet again tries to pick up a fight with Ichikawa and comments on his flat biceps, telling him to build some muscle if he doesn't want to be called a woman. However, Ichikawa, who doesn't think that Furuhashi's muscles are any bigger than his, tells him not to make any stupid statements. Kafka, on the other hand, who has the biggest muscles in town, tries to show off his six-pack abs when accidentally it turns into family pack size, revealing that he was just controlling his breath to make himself look bulky. Furuhashi burst into laughter seeing Kafka's dad body, which triggers Kafka's ego, prompting him to pick up a fight with the youngster. At that moment Kaguraji enters the shower, revealing his Terminator body, which itself humiliates Kafka, Ichikawa, and Furuhashi, prompting them to hide their petty bodies underwater. At that moment, they all realize that flexing their muscles does not matter and what only matters are their results in the defense corps. On the other side, Shinomiya enters the girls' restroom along with some other girls, where she comes across Captain Mina, who is casually having a drink. Just by her presence Shinomiya becomes intimidated and apologizes to Mina for ruining her privacy, but Mina doesn't think much of it and tells the girls to come in, as she is just about to go outside anyway. Shinomiya, while heading inside, takes a look at Mina's body, which surprisingly doesn't have many muscles. So, it naturally makes her question how and why Mina is the strongest amongst all defense corps fighters. She asks Mina how she has so much combat power, and in response Mina tells her to stand by her side, saying that she wants to demonstrate to her the basics of her training that have made her so strong. Meanwhile, the boys talk about why they joined the defense corps, and the first one to answer this question is Furuhashi, who proudly states that he only took this exam because of his crush on Captain Mina Ashiro. Apparently, when he was in middle school he was attacked by a kaiju when Captain Mina appeared out of nowhere and saved his life. Since that day he has wanted to be like her, and that is why he has joined the defense corps. The others state that they also have a similar story and claim that they too have come here because of Captain Mina. It's natural though, since she is this generation's biggest superhero, but what's not natural is this loser Kafka claiming in front of everyone else that Mina is his childhood friend when she doesn't seem to give a single F about him in the present. The boys don't believe Kafka a single bit, so they first hear every single part of his childhood story and find it rather surprising that he was this close to their beloved captain. As a matter of fact, the shock is too grave as they all end up being rendered unconscious law. Anyway, from the next day on, the training commences again and everyone's friendship builds up as well as their strength. Kafka, who is always left behind in the physical part, works twice as hard to catch up with his teammates and even stays up late at night studying to do well in the future. One night, the vice captain Hoshina, who claims to have heard everything that Kafka has said about him being friends with Mina, questions him about it. He sees his determination to become the best of the best, just so that he can stand beside Mina, so he gives him a heads up not to get too attached to his teammates, as many of them will end up losing their lives in the near future. At that very moment, the emergency bell rings, which wakes all of the new recruits up, making them realize that it is the calling for their very first mission. And with that, we have come to the end of this part. Stay tuned for next part. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive all the latest updates.